and then I restored it for 5 years, and then the journey began.
And did you have to take the engine apart, or was that all?
This has all fallen apart.
That's the beauty of these old things, you can understand and comprehend it all. But a little bit of technical expertise makes it all work.
Yes, you just have to deal with it intensively.
Also your leather bags, you can see that they are very old, but they are still the originals.
This was really intended as a combat vehicle.
Hello friends, today again an extremely cool episode. Helga arrived here with his heavy Wehrmacht machine. And we want to see if we can get some more detailed information from him about it. The A75 was considered a secret weapon in World War II. It was still in use in the last years of war. Exclusive person, exclusive machine, Helga is here and has brought us a beautiful motorcycle. I know the machine, you know it inside and out for sure, Helga. Please tell us a little about the motorcycle. How does one come across such a cool machine?
Of course, it didn't all start with a sidecar right away. At least not one from West German production, but rather with a Russian sidecar. That's where I gained my experience, and then I said, at some point one also have to bring in the great-grandfather or father of the whole story, and then I made an effort and bought some parts in the 90s, dismantled in crates and boxes.
So was it a barn find or what was it?
It wasn't exactly a barn find, but the man had brought it from Poland and intended to assemble it for himself. Unfortunately, he never got around to it and wanted to pass it on to his son, who wasn't really interested. So I bought it, spent 5 years restoring it, and then the journey began.
It's not easy to restore something like that. We have AR-75 from World War II here. What year is it?
It was built in 1943.
Built in 1943, and this is also the version that's not as common, with this helmet on top, with the sand. You often see the Saharan machine, but this one has a toolbox on top. Not very common these days, is it?
It has a disadvantage, but also a huge advantage. The disadvantage is that you can't submerge the vehicle here, as water or dirt would then get into the air filter. If it's up here, of course, that doesn't happen.
Not very common these days, is it?
Exactly, but the big advantage is that the machine runs quietly. When you drive around with a helmet air filter and the quieter the tank is, the less gasoline in the tank, the louder the motorcycle becomes, and it really hurts your ears. I know people who have such a thing and they stuff foam and all sorts of things in there, but it's still always loud, and you have the intake noises right in front of your face, right in front of your ears.
Yes, so really solid German engineering. I think Hitler ordered 2 such military sidecar motorcycles from 2 companies, Zundap and BMW. At BMW it was the R75 and at Zundap the KS750. Both were similar in terms of performance, I believe. 25 horsepower, or how much did they have?
The reason for this is that the fuel was synthetically produced, and therefore the compression had to be reduced, because it only reached 70 for octane in order to achieve knock resistance and thus optimal performance. The original engine had, I can't say exactly, but over 30 horsepower.
And did you have to disassemble everything in the engine?
Everything was disassembled. There was a motor included that was supposedly restored, but that wasn't the case. Nothing was new inside. It was just nicely glued together with sealant, so I redid everything from scratch. 44,900 kilometers, and I have driven approximately 43,000 kilometers with this gearbox.
Really, you're quite young.
I had the first gearbox rebuilt. It lasted 1,900 kilometers, and then it was really worn out. With the gearbox I rebuilt myself, I've driven the rest of the distance.
And what's the reason for that? Did you use the old gears?
No. But there are good new gears and they have to be assembled properly. It just works well. Of course, by now you can feel that it doesn't shift as smoothly anymore. At some point, it will need to be taken apart, as long as it works. Even if it's a bit tricky at times, it stays together.
You've been quite sporty with it, having driven so many kilometers. Where have you been with it?
All over Germany. It goes quickly. 6 weeks ago, I drove to Schleiz because my son was doing an internship there. Round trip, and during the time my son was working there, my wife and I went on a few nice tours.
Does your wife always come along?
Not always, but sometimes.
Cool.
If not camping, then in a vacation rental.
That's how you can lure her in.
And then suddenly it's 2,000 kilometers. Yes.
Is it a German machine or is it from the Eastern Front campaign?
This one is from Poland. It broke down there, and the person who had it before was into model making, casting models. So whenever you went to Poland and picked up things for his business, he would bring back a few parts as well.
Immer wenn nach Polen gefahren ist und wieder irgendwelche Sachen da abgeholt hat, betrieblich, hat dann immer so ein paar Teile mitgebracht. Ne?
Oh, so that's how it ended up in those crates?
Exactly. And that's where it stayed until the 90s.
How long did you take?
4 years. Around that much time.
Was it already a sidecar, or did you put it together like that?
Yes, everything was there from the basic concept. However, many parts were missing: fenders, lighting, and lots of small parts were missing too. I can't remember all of them anymore.
And there wasn't really a scene for this back then? Nowadays you can get pretty much everything reproduced, but 30 years ago that wasn't the case at all.
Back then, of course, there were many original parts available, and also some technology parts were available too, to some extent, but yes, 30 years ago that was quite scarce. But still there were original parts available, including technology parts and also gears and pistons and such things. They were all available back then. Not all of them were reproductions. Gears obviously were, but pistons and valves were running productions. Pistons are from Opel. I don't know about valves, but they were also from running production.
Are you an engine mechanic?
No, I'm just a regular mechanic.
A regular mechanic can understand this technology. That's the beauty of these old things. You can understand and comprehend everything about them. If one has some technical understanding, then everything works out.
One just needs to engage intensively with them, and then everything works out. And one mustn't forget that when one really rides these machines, they require a lot of maintenance. Try telling someone today that they need to top up the oil after 200 to 300 kilometers. Or after 5,000 kilometers, you have to disassemble the engine because bearings need to be lubricated. Or with the oil supply in the differential of 300 milliliters, you have to refill after 5,000 kilometers. But back then this was quite normal. After 2,000 kilometers, an oil change was due.
Do you know how many of these R75 models were built?
Yes, approximately 17 to 18,000 units. One cannot say exactly how many there were because after the war some were assembled in Eisenach, for Russia so to speak, and some of those keep resurfacing.
These machines were used extensively again.
Additionally, in East Germany they attempted to reproduce R75s. A W0700 was the name of this reproduction.
Exactly. I think there were 1 or 2 prototypes of those. It looks similar if one looks at them, technically speaking, like engines, etc.
However, R75 has a boxer engine while Opel has a V engine. If one doesn't see this at first glance, because it isn't really straight. If one looks closely from below, one can see that it's a V engine. But they also quickly realize that, oh dear, there are so many parts. For their purpose, this is totally nonsense.
Everything in East Germany should be as simple as possible, not complicated or expensive like this motorcycle, which should be for common people.